Well, good morning. Today is Tuesday, November 30th, 2010. My name is Larry Harris, and I'm a volunteer for the Palm Springs Air Museum here in California. Part of our mission is to record and preserve the history of our country's military conflicts, especially World War II and Korea. As part of the Veterans History Project, the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., we conduct interviews of veterans and civilians who participated in these conflicts. And today we have the privilege and the honor of interviewing Mr. James New.
Now is correct
Okay, I'm glad you corrected me. It's James Now. Mr. James, while I'm up here adjusting the camera, would you state your name, your pronunciation, how you spell it, and your birthday to keep our records straight?
My name is James Joseph Now, and spelled N-A-U, and my date of birth is July 3rd, 1932.
Let's start at the beginning. As I say, where you came from makes a huge difference in what you did in your later life. And with our history before that we had talked about, could you tell us about where you were born, what you went through with your family and so forth at that early time?
Well, I was born out on a farm in southern Ohio, close to Caldwell, in a little, I can't even call it a one-horse town because it's about a half-horse town, and it's called Carlisle, on a farm that was by my mother's parents' farm, which is, the family name is Crum, C-R-U-M. And from there, my dad started doing various jobs, because this was during the
Was
Depression.
this a farm that you lived on?
Yes, big farm. And this was until my dad started various businesses. One of them was a very interesting business, buying a stone crusher and breaking up big stones into small stones for road construction. And then eventually, after that, we moved up to a little town called Louisville, Ohio, which is up north, just northeast of Canton, Ohio. And from there, he started a business in auto repair. Well, first we had a small farm, but his main thing was doing auto repair. And he had a garage, and I was actually probably started out there as being mechanically interested because of it. And one time I remember specifically, next to the garage was a neighbor's home there, and he had about a 1928 Oldsmobile in the backyard with grass growing up all around it and everything. And so I asked him, what's he going to do with the car? And he says, well, you could have it if you could take it out here. So I started bugging my dad to get that car, and which he did eventually. And my first mechanical job was, I was about 14 then, overhauling the engine on that thing. So I got a good break-in period there, learning how to overhaul a 1928 Oldsmobile engine, which was later converted, by the way, to a tractor, which
So
we
you
used
got
out
your
on the
start.
farm.
You got your start in love for mechanics.
Yes.
At that time.
Yes.
How old were you when you went into high school? Was this still one of your interests?
No, not, well, of course, when I would come home from school and everything, I used to, this is high school now, we graduated up to high school, paint cars for my dad. My dad would get the cars ready during the daytime, and when I came home from school, I would paint the cars. I was fairly good sprayer, paint sprayer, and did that for at least my freshman and sophomore year, which I drove a 1934 Plymouth back and forth to school, which was about 7 miles one way. And it was a safe car because it only go 55 miles an hour wide open. I think that's why my dad let me have it. So anyway, after that, I started going into, working at a
Did you stay with your family during this time?
Yes,
Mhm.
yes, I was with the family all the time, and some of my friends from Louisville there. This was the Korean War had started in June of 1950, so about 1951 they were getting down to me for the draft time, getting close, and I decided, well, you know, I was a pretty good rifleman already.
Mm-hmm.
I knew how to shoot a gun really well, and that's one of the things I did when I was young. And I said, well, I don't need too much training in that area. Maybe I ought to try for one where I could go to school. So I joined the Air Force with a friend of mine from Louisville. He went to medics after basic, and I went to aircraft engine school after basic. And that basic was in Lackland Air Force Base, Texas. And that was in December of 1951.
How old were you then?
Well, let's see. I'm not even sure. 19, I think.
19.
Yeah.
So you're out of high school.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so one of the best things that could have happened, though, was for me to get out of that little town of Louisville, because I saw the outside world. From there, from Louisville, you don't see too much of the outside world.
Yeah.
And so I was able to get out and get going. And so after basic, though, at Lackland, I went to Shepherd Air Force Base in Texas, which is next to Wichita Falls, Texas. And went to aircraft and engine school, was what they called it those days, and now they call it aircraft and power plant. But and it was about a 6 months course. And the last phase was where you learn to become a crew chief or something like that. And I was pulled out of that and sent to Chanute Air Force Base in Illinois, Champaign, Illinois.
Now, is this, did I miss, was this when you were out in the service?
Yes, sir.
Oh,
yes.
you didn't reach the point that I could tell.
Oh, okay, yes.
Yeah, when you came out of high school and you went to training, then what's the connection as far as you've got, now you're receiving training, but you're already in the Air Force?
Yes.
When did you go in and
Well, a couple of friends, buddies, went in the Navy. And one friend of mine tried to get in the Navy, and he said he couldn't do it. So he scheduled to go to Air Force to enlist, and I said, well, I can't go that day. So the friend I told you about, Kenny Huffman, by the way, is his name, now deceased, he and I went to the Air Force, and we enlisted together.
Hmm.
And then from there we
And
went.
where did you
Oh,
enlist?
Canton, Ohio.
Oh, Canton.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you were in the Air Force, and then that's when you started the training that you were talking about.
Yes, that's right.
Before. And immediately after signing up, where did you go?
To basic in Lackland,
Mm.
Lackland Air Force Base.
And then they're on for further
Oh,
mechanical
well,
training.
that was just basic now.
Mhm.
Then from there, they transferred me to Shepherd,
Mm-hmm.
which is another base in Texas, but up for a little further north and near Wichita Falls. And it was a very large base. I think it's still there.
Mm-hmm.
And went through that, and I did really exceptionally well in the electrical department. And so that's why the Air Force, being very good at deducting things, sometimes they said maybe he'll work out as an electrician, so that's
Yeah.
why they sent me to electrical
Well,
school.
you obviously had so much more experience and training than most men would have at that age.
Yes, that's
I
right.
could see
did.
why they would jump on you immediately. Okay, then where did you go after that? Where were you assigned after your training?
Okay, after about 3.5 months or so at Chanute Air Force Base, I had made my second strike there, and they sent me to Oxnard Air Force Base in California, which is very close to Oxnard. Ventura is probably the most known town, and then a little tiny town called Camarillo.
Mm-hmm.
And so the funny part is, on my way to the base, which nobody knew where it was for sure, it was a brand new base, and so I come in this little town of Camarillo, And I got off the bus there and asked around, where's the Oxnard Air Force Base? Nobody knew. Nobody knew where the base was. And so one guy, he says, you know, they're doing a lot of construction out there, out the bean fields out there. And he said, it looks like they're building big buildings and things like that. So I said, well, I'm going to take a chance. I hired a taxi and went out there, and sure enough, that was Oxnard Air Force Base. Brand new base. One airplane, when I got there, was a C-45, which was a twin Beech, actually. And that was it. That's the only airplane on the base, and it was muddy. You know, it was really,
Sounds like you were the only serviceman on the base.
There wasn't that many when I arrived. So, and that's when my shop chief, or not shop chief, the maintenance supervisor, a master sergeant, says, I'm going to show you your shop. And I said, my shop? And he said, yeah, so I'll take you down the hangar and show you the shop. So we go down, and he opens the door. There's nothing in the room at all, not even a chair. So I go ahead, and he said, well, this will be your shop, and you'll be getting some men that are scheduled to come in soon. And he gave me a book about 5 inches thick to order parts for F-51 Mustangs. Well, he said, just order whatever tools and parts you think you're going to need. And he had no idea what I needed, and I didn't either.
You didn't either.
So I started going through the book, and everything that looked like it would be used, but I hadn't ordered it. And it was surprising how quickly everything came in. So we must have had a pretty high priority, because everything came in really quickly.
That's unusual for the
Yes,
service.
it sure is. So within a month, I had the shop set up, and had about 5 guys there already. And mostly, all these guys were OJTs. None of them had any aircraft training. They came right out of basic and to work on airplanes. So I had to train my shop guys how to do everything. So I did that for about 18 months at Oxnard, and which is, by the way, Oxnard now is Camarillo Airport. It's
How fast did the base develop as far as airplanes? And
very quickly. Within 2 months, we had a couple squadrons of Mustangs in.
Hmm.
Yep, that was fast.
And their function or duty at that time was training?
No, the Mustangs were there in the Air Defense Command.
Oh.
Yeah, we had special alert hangars down in the end of the runway where they had these big doors that, if alert called, the big doors open within a few seconds, and the airplanes would then scramble. They'd go take off.
What was the danger at that time? That was in 1951.
51. Well, by then it was 52.
Oh.
Yes, by then it was 52. And the thing is that, the danger actually was mostly generated by the type of equipment you're working with, which is dangerous. And we had one pilot killed initially in a Mustang, or one on a scramble. One ran into the side of the other, because Mustangs are notorious for not being able to see out the front. You have to zigzag to taxi. And they'd line up on a runway, and if you got a little bit cocked and didn't know it, you could run into another airplane.
I guess I meant what was the danger, that the reason for the 51s and the scrambling?
Because of the high tension between, especially with the Korean War going on, between the United States and Russia. Because in those days, that
part
was
of the Cold War routine.
Cold War was in full swing at that time.
Let's see, Korea was still in progress.
Korea was still in progress at that time, yes, because we used to listen to the reports of how many airplanes were, the F-86s were then flying at that time. At the beginning, the F-86s didn't fly because they didn't have any over there. They had just F-82Gs and F-80s, and a little bit later, Corsairs came in when they got a ship to come in carry the Corsairs.
So you had a mixture of several different kinds of aircraft.
Yeah, well, that was in Korea, which I was very fortunate. I never got there, which I'll explain later.
Were there many scrambles?
Yes, there were quite a few scrambles. Any airplane that came out that wasn't recognized and shouldn't be there, which was, we had Point Mugu, Port Hueneme, and which are, well, Point Mugu at that time was a fairly high secret naval research center, and so there were scrambles to find out who these people were who were intruding, and most of the, all the time it turned out to be private pilots, which I am one, but.
Now, how long were you in that situation of Cold War scrambling?
That was for the full 18 months at Oxnard Air Force Base. And we later got in F-94Cs, which is a Lockheed manufactured single engine jet with afterburner and radar operator and a pilot. And it was for Air Defense Command, because obviously the F-51s were slow compared to what a jet would do, and we was able to transition into the F-51s or to the F-94Cs very easily.
Now, interesting, everybody's familiar with the P-38s.
Yes.
But could you give us a little background on how the P-38 was developed into another plane type of aircraft with twin pilots and so forth?
Oh, yeah, well, that's once I got into Japan. See, what happened is we transitioned to the F-94C Lockheeds. This was still at Oxnard. And then at that time, they were getting more personnel in the Air Force to fill spots like I had, which I was only by then in Airman First Class. And they had a tech sergeant to come in to take over the shop then. And then I was sent overseas to Itazuki Air Force Base, Japan.
You were sent to Japan from that point? From, not Magoo, but Oxnard.
Oxnard, right.
And you were in Oxnard about 18 months, did you say?
Yes.
Yeah. Then you were shipped to
Itazuki Air Force Base,
Japan there.
Which is on Kyushu, the southern island.
Oh.
And it's right across from Korea. And the squadron that I was assigned to was called the 68th Fighter Interceptor Squadron. And when I arrived there, the guy who was in charge of the electrical shop was scheduled to come back to the States. So 1 month after I arrived there, I was in charge of the electrical shop then. So I went from one shop to the other. And
was it new type of aircraft that you were dealing with then?
At that time, we were dealing with the F-86D, which was called a dog, by the way. And it was a single pilot aircraft, which he did a dual function though. He ran the radar and flew the airplane, which turned out not to be the best system. So we had trouble with the first models were -35s, F-86D-35, and they had all kinds of problems. And then they came out with the F-86D-45, which was a really fairly good airplane compared to the earlier version. And we flew intercept missions over Korea then, and this was after the conflict. But
well, how would you compare the P-38 with
the twin Mustang or the twin?
That was
F-82G.
designated what, the P?
Well, it was a squadron before I arrived there had what was called a twin Mustang, F-82G, which was had two fuselages looked just like Mustangs, and in the center, the wing part that connected the two fuselages together had a big radome there, and so the left fuselage was for the pilot, and the right fuselage was for the radar operator. And when the Korean War broke out, they were the only people that were able to come in quickly and try to stave off or at least slow down the communists.
Mm-hmm.
And,
So they were in combat almost
well,
immediately.
immediately, yes.
Mhm.
And
And I suppose, well, being different types, they had different purposes.
right,
Yeah.
they actually served the purpose of, it was initially an interceptor.
Mm-hmm.
That's the G version. The F-82, which was the non-interceptor, it had two pilots, and it was long-range escort and long-range harassing of the enemy.
Mm.
This was during the Second World War, its function.
Not particularly good at air combat, or
Oh, actually, it was,
No.
because it had two big, powerful engines there, V-12s, and it had a good rate of climb, high speed,
Mhm.
and
heavy armament.
all it had was 6 50 cals on
Mm. No rockets or anything
it.
at that point.
No, it could carry them though.
Yeah.
They weren't fitted at that time until later on with rockets, because they would intercept the troops moving from North Korea to
Mhm.
South Korea.
Now, how long were you at that base in Japan?
About 16 months about there.
And most of the flights were, or at least were combat across the straits
Yes.
to Korea.
Mhm.
Yeah. Did you have many of them coming back limping, or was
Well, I'll tell you, one time, stationed in Korea were F-86s, which was the ones that were fighting the Russian MiG-15. And it turns out that after the truce was signed, those airplanes came back to our base for, they just moved the whole squadrons out back to Itazuki Air Force Base. And when they came in, they had doors missing off the landing gears, they had parts missing, even panels missing off the airplane. It looked terrible. And so they had refurbished the airplanes completely,
Mhm.
and I'm not sure
Did I
when.
miss a point? They were hadn't. What happened to them? That you say they were doors missing and so forth.
That's because in Korea, they didn't have all the parts they needed and everything, and of course the truce was signed, they didn't need to be there any longer.
Oh.
And so they did that, but then about, I'd say, I don't know if it was 3 or 4 months or so after they came in, a B-29 was shot down by the Chinese. I don't know if you remember that
Yeah.
happening. Well, that B-29 was doing radio listening, actually spying, but it was in international
Observation
waters.
and-
International waters.
Yeah.
But the Chinese shot it down. Well, the next morning, I wake up and hear all these engines running, and here both squadrons were all lined up, getting ready to go back to Korea, which they did. And we heard about 3 or 4 days later where they shot down quite a few Chinese MiG-15s. What they did,
That wasn't common knowledge.
they pulled a Pappy Boyington trick where they actually flew real close formation and made it at the altitudes of the B-29 would be flying, the same altitude the one they shot down was. And so the Chinese came out, and when they did, they took care of them. And when those guys came back to the base with these red stars on the side of their airplane, they were proud.
Yeah. How long did that type of operation go on?
It only went on for about a month.
About a month.
And then they all came back, and Korea was really not needed as far as a fighter squadron being there all the time, because the MiGs would come down, and then our F-86Ds would intercept them. Because we knew, even when they were crossing toward our direction, before they crossed the 38th parallel, we were on our way.
Scrambling and on your
Yes.
way.
Mhm.
From Japan.
From Japan, yes.
Mhm.
It's a short distance
Yeah.
across the channel there.
Do you know? Do you have any idea how many MiGs they might have shot down in that kind of trapped, you
I
might call
think
it?
4 or 5.
Mhm.
It was quite a few. The Chinese were really mad about it, that we
Yeah,
trapped them.
yeah. That wasn't particularly common knowledge at
No, I know.
that time. And then on your consideration of what, China backed off then because of this?
Yes, there.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure how soon they started or resumed the B-29 missions for along the coast of China, but it wasn't very long afterward they
Yeah.
started.
And did they continue flying the B-29 flights?
Hmm.
But no trouble from the Chinese?
No trouble.
After that. Speak softly, huh?
Yes. Well,
Then how long did you stay then in Japan?
till November of 1955,
So you were there quite a while.
and then I
Yeah.
was discharged. I came back and got discharged. They wanted me to re-enlist. I was staff sergeant then. They wanted me to re-enlist, but I don't know. I almost did though.
Yeah. How long were you in total then?
It'd be about, let's see, 3 years, 11 months, about,
Mhm.
just about
Yeah.
4 years.
Most of that time was spent in Oxnard and Japan.
That's correct.
Yeah. How did you get from Oxnard to Japan? Did you fly or?
No, very interested. Glad you asked that. That's a good, interesting thing. I was airman first class then, so I went on the ship. Breckenridge and the Buckner were 2 twin ships,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not sure if I went over to Breckenridge and came back on the Buckner or vice versa. But it was a sister ship, so when I came back, I knew my way all around the ship already. But the thing is, I was put in charge of the serving of the food. I had about 8 guys who would, dish out the food on the ship. But before we would start, we got to eat whatever we wanted. And then after we finished, we got to eat again.
So you went from mechanics to chow.
Yes.
Well, that's in that way you assured yourself of good meals.
Yes, that's for sure.
Yeah. How long did it take you? About a month to get across?
No, not quite that long. We stopped in Hawaii on the way over
No.
for just, I think, 2 days. And then,
They let you off the ship?
yes, and then we got to roam around and
I know.
see the place.
Yeah. During World War II, they didn't let you off the ship too
I
often
know.
in Hawaii.
Yeah.
They were afraid of what was going to happen.
That's right. Yeah, I read that in an article
Yeah.
someplace.
So then when you got back to the States, then what?
I forget what base it was up north in California.
Mhm.
I was discharged from.
From
And
that base?
so buddy that I met there at the base just bought a brand new 1956 Ford, real fancy, a lot of chrome on it, and I rode back with him
Mhm.
to Ohio. So that's about the story. That's it.
Now, when you got back, then what happened to your life then?
Oh, I went to school. I went to electronic school, electronic engineering, and then after I finished with that, while I was going to school, I worked at an auto parts store, rebuilding generators, alternators, starters from diesel trucks on down to cars. And after school, I got in the Apollo program, which was the program to go to the moon. And the company I was assigned to had the job of making the little reaction control engines for the Apollo program.
Yeah.
There were 16 engines on the landing module and 16 engines on the command module. And we had to start out, I was in instrumentation, doing the instrumentation part of it. And the engines, they might run 1,000 times and all of a sudden one would blow up. So, because they're very volatile propellants, was nitrogen tetroxide,
These were jets you're talking about.
No, these are rockets.
Oh, radio.
Yeah, these are only about this big.
Oh.
Yeah, but there were a cluster of 4 of them, and then 4 around the position around the landing craft the landing module,
Mm-hmm.
and the service module, they called it, the one that continued to circle around the moon.
Mm-hmm.
16 engines on every flight. We had 32 engines.
Mm.
So, but it took a while of instrumentation with the most sophisticated equipment you could buy to try to find out what that problem was.
Mm.
And eventually, with the high-speed cameras, 1,000 frames per second at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Now they have 6,000 frames per second.
So you were in the space program then?
Yes, I was in the space
Yeah.
program. And then after that, after Apollo was finished, I went to Electrical Optics and Solid State Physics Lab, which was the same company.
Mm-hmm.
But, they transferred it to that lab, and I worked with 2 scientists trying to develop a camera for a pilot or a soldier to wear on his helmet, that in combat they could see what's going on. So,
Yeah,
uh,
that was space tech. I mean,
that
spacey
was-
tech.
Yeah, it was just the beginning of that type of technology, you see. And I still remember the guy's name, Manfred Jarson, a German guy, and Jacques Enlay, obviously a French guy. And Jacques Enlay was at that time about 70 years old, and boy, I had a hard time keeping up with that guy. We're working all day long.
Mhm.
He had more energy than. But by the time we finished, the contract was only for a year. So when that was over, I went into Doppler sonar,
Mm.
which was another thing for geophysical survey boats and
Yeah.
super tankers.
Uh-huh.
And geophysical survey boats used them for the grids that they ran looking for oil. They would run grids, and the Doppler sonar would keep track of the lines so that they knew exactly where they were in the world when the oil was found, if any was found.
Mhm.
And did that for a few years. And then
Where were you based then, or lived?
I was living in California then.
Yes,
I moved
sir.
out to
Oh.
California. I actually, when I got out of service, I tried automobile business again, and I had a garage for a while, body shop, and I really didn't like it anymore.
Not like you thought you would.
So I got rid of that and went to school and
Mhm.
came out to California, then got the job at
Yeah.
Marquardt Corporation was the name of the company, right next to Van Nuys Airport.
Mm-hmm.
And we used to watch the U-2s take off and land there, and what's called the pregnant guppy. I don't know if you ever heard of that one.
Mm-hmm.
It was made especially for carry modules of rockets. Big. It had a great big fuselage on it,
Yeah.
and they did the trial runs there and first takeoff of the thing,
Mm.
and a lot of interesting things going on.
Yeah.
But then after that, I went to, of course, as mentioned, the solid state optics lab and the Doppler sonar, which got me all around the world.
Mm.
I ended up going to, Sweden and Holland and Germany and
What was the reason for this travel as such to?
in some cases install it, mainly to calibrate it and to get it working when it wasn't working.
Oh.
Because one ship I went on, it was in Alaska, and I pulled out the drawer where the servos were, and it was just full of fuzz and stuff that they never vacuumed or anything. No wonder the thing
No
didn't
wonder
work.
it didn't work. Huh?
It was funny. It's in Bristol Bay
Ah.
off of Alaska. And that was another one interesting when I went out there and on a ship. And at nighttime, the helicopter, we're going out from a place called Bear Lake, looking for this ship in Bristol Bay. And it looked like, when we finally found it, looked like a guy about a mile away with a match. And when we got close to the ship, they had all the lights on. lit up from bow to stern, and had to make a helicopter landing. It was kind of rough seas at that time, and he gets just as the ship comes to the top of the crest, he plops that helicopter down. And yeah, when I say plopped it down, that's what he did. And then we go down, and then from then on we're riding the waves.
Ride the waves.
Yeah.
Difficult flying, to say
Yeah.
the least. And this was at night, too.
This was at night.
Yeah.
Of course, in Alaska, it isn't quite as night,
Mhm.
but when it gets dark, the contrast is amazing. It'll be light, and then when it gets dark fast, and it's very dark.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, it gets light at 1 or 2 in the morning. It's light coming in already.
Which was the most exciting place that you went to on your excursions around the world?
Well, let's see. Probably in the Persian Gulf was I got to Dubai, and I had to take a crew boat out to the supertanker. Now, this was during the time that the oil blockade was on in the early 70s. I don't know if you remember that.
Mhm.
The Arab countries blockaded the United States, and the ship I was on was a American flagship, and we had to keep radio silence, except for VHF. VHF is just a line of sight, so they couldn't use any HF or any frequencies that would carry long distance because they didn't want anybody to know where the ship was, because you never knew what the Arabs were going to do. And so 12 hours I rode this crew boat, bouncing around out there, and finally we get to it, and you climb aboard the ship. Now we're talking about a ship that's empty. It's a ship that's 1,000 feet long, and 70,
Was it a tanker?
70 feet straight up. You're looking at the side of it, climbing up on a
It
Jacob's
was a
ladder.
tanker.
It's a tanker.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got to a place called Karg Island, which is off of Iran, and that's when the Shah of Iran was still a friend.
Oh, it did.
Okay.
Okay, so we're recording again.
Let
Okay.
me get that volume down.
As I was saying regarding the
Is this going? I turned the volume down, yeah.
the approximately 20 ships that were at Karg Island, I thought I was going to be there for a week waiting on those things to be loaded. But the next morning, up comes the anchor, and we were loaded up that day, and by that night we were gone. We were on our way back down. So when I got off that ship, that was probably one of the most exciting trips because of the possibilities of what the Arabs might try to do at that time.
What were the possibilities? In other
Well,
words,
they-
we're talking about a danger. What kind of a danger?
Blowing up the tankers. That's why they kept radio silence, that they didn't know where the tankers were. And the Navy had protection ships out there too,
Mm-hmm.
but they can't watch every ship all the time, so, especially when you start to get closer to the shores.
If I remember correctly, there were none blown up, though.
No, there wasn't any blowing up.
Mm.
It was,
Was it the protection was that good, or that they just didn't have the intelligence to?
I think the Arabs, even though they wanted to really threaten the United States, they didn't want to really cause an incident of that type, because it would just, well, all that crude oil, and that's ugly stuff. All that crude oil would be washed ashore, who knows where, and the Persian Gulf isn't that big.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Now, where in the scheme of things in the war was that we were at that point? Had we invaded Kuwait?
no, actually, at that time, it was just strictly so-called peacetime.
Before any of the conflicts?
Yes,
Mhm.
or actually after, because the only conflict that came about was, of course, Vietnam then.
Mm-hmm. Okay, from that duty of doing sonar work, where did you go from there as far as the tankers in that incident?
Yes, well, I went aboard a few other tankers, and one was off of let's see, I went to Thailand and then to Malaysia, Penang, Malaysia. I got on another tanker, or not, I mean on another geophysical survey boat. And that one was a big job because the machine was much more complicated than the one that's on the tankers. The Doppler sonar was used for deeper penetration in the water and everything of that type. And one thing that was interesting though, we stopped for a while, the captain did for some reason, and I guess maybe wanted to give the crew a break or something, and they were getting ready to jump overboard into the ocean there off of Penang, and they happened to notice in the water sea snakes, and you surely wouldn't want to jump off into sea snakes because they're deadly poisonous.
Oh, yeah.
But not me, I wasn't going to jump off regardless.
Why were they going to jump
Oh,
off?
just for swimming.
recreation.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
just for recreation. Yes.
Yeah, and then climb up the cargo net and do it again.
Yes. These geophysical survey boats were really sophisticated.
Mm-hmm. This is
They-
what you were serving on then, a survey boat.
Yes. Yeah. Versus a tanker. Now, the we call them geo boats. They had, they would trail out about 50 yards behind them a explosive charge device. What it was a manifold, and with something like a big truck tire attached behind it, and it was circular and about 3 feet long, and they'd squirt oxygen and kerosene or just plain oil into the head, in the manifold head, and that combination would blow up, and it would expand the tire-like device and send a shock wave down to the bottom, and they would read the reflection back to determine what the Earth was like underneath that particular point. And it was interesting because every time they did it, the ship would shake a little. But prior to that, I was on a French ship, a geophysical survey boat, and believe me, French ships are a lot different. But they used dynamite, and they would shoot it down a tube, and it'd go out. As soon as it hit the salt water, it was timed to go off in 3 or 4 seconds. And when it went off, it shook the ship, really shook it, almost like a mine or something hit it. You know, it really rattled the thing. And they, of course, that was illegal for the United States to use because it killed the fish, where our boats didn't do that.
What, you said French ships were different. In what way were French ships
Oh, they
different?
were really dirty, everything.
Not like the
Not like
British.
ours at all.
Well, the British weren't quite as clean as we are.
One trick the French guys tried to pull on me though, having dinner in the mess hall, and they let go. They had in their hand a cockroach. Let it go, and it came running across the table toward me. You know, well, I had been warned about these guys before, so I just ignored that cockroach. I just watched him run off the edge of the table. And they looked at me, they thought they were going to have a big laugh.
Didn't give you the
They
chance.
did get it. Another interesting thing about the captain of that ship could have been a twin for my dad. I mean, he really looked just like my dad did. And my dad was German, but it's amazing, the resemblance.
We did, at the beginning of the interview, you did tell us why knew. Now,
It's actually the way Germans, they get deeper in the throat now, like that. It's pronounced that way.
spelled N-A-U.
Yes,
Yeah.
means flowing valley. Means it's like the wind blowing over the grass and stuff in the valley. And in Bavaria, a lot of towns end with N-A-U.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
Now,
important.
when the ships that you were on before, did you continue with this this type of duty?
No, actually, I changed jobs later on. I went into a job that was completely unique in the sense that it's a company called Codevin Tech, company for the development of industrial technology.
What year approximately might that have been?
That had been about 72 or 73. And we were, it's a French company, and we were doing things in conjunction with Russia as far as the peacetime had pretty well set its way in for a while. Anyway, and so we had a system which is called neutron activation system, which was used to measure the energy value in food that came into Moscow. That was one of the functions. Another, let's see, was
Now, were you in Moscow?
yes, I spent I think I was there three times, 6 weeks at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And another one was where they would want to measure the Earth's conductivity under the ultra high pressure of things. And so we delivered to the Russians what's called a Kennedy press and McCarran press or something like that was the name. And they were ultra high pressure presses up to 1 million PSI.
Mm-hmm.
And the sample was only, that we pressed was only about a 1 inch square.
Oh, yeah.
And the tests that we ran were very interesting. We measured the resistance of the box and of the sample, I mean. And within, when we got close to 1 million PSI, all of a sudden it would snap. The molecules would realign and it would change resistance.
Yeah.
And as soon as we took the pressure back off again, it'd go back to normal. And that's what was happening within the Earth,
Yeah.
the soundings that they were
Yeah.
making.
So you continued on with this type of work.
Yes,
A wide
electronic.
variety. I'm amazed at the talent and background that
Well, I
you
got one more to go yet.
Go ahead.
Okay, and I did that for a few years until actually Jimmy Carter was president, and if you remember the Olympics, it was in about 1978, I think, we boycotted them.
Mm-hmm.
So we stopped sending things to Moscow then. Well, there was another system that I didn't mention was when the sample was being pressed, we also could take X-rays through it, and we had a device where we would a special chamber made where the X-rays would enter after it went through the sample, and that was a very interesting project there.
Yeah.
And then we had super cooled. We had liquid nitrogen where we would cool the sample too, so we had hot to cold and all kinds of things. And we made diamonds.
Oh.
It pressed so hard with carbon. You could take carbon and heat it up under those PSIs, make carbon into diamonds.
They let you sell it?
No, they weren't. They were like industrial. Black. They were black and
Black, yeah.
and small little pieces by the time it.
Oh. When did you finally, well, you retired when?
Well, what I did next was I went into with Teledyne Controls into commercial avionics, and I worked with the ACAR system, Aircraft Communication Addressing and Reporting System, which is a digital data link, and did that for 17 years there. That was the longest stint in one place. Yeah, I started out with right from the beginning when the ACARs was just starting, and with the development and everything, and now it's a big thing in the airlines because it saves time, voice time, or radio time. Instead of speaking a message, they just go beep, and that's it. The whole message is gone. So it was did that.
Had an
With that
amazing-
also, I did some traveling, got to ride jump seat a lot in commercial airliners, from 747s down to de Havilland DH7s, and did that for those 17 years. It's interesting projects.
You flew all over the world then,
Yes.
doing those.
Yeah.
Amazing career, I should say. Jumping back to your service time, I always ask a person that I'm interviewing, is there anything that you wish you would have said now, that you can tell us now, so later on you don't say, darn, I wish I had told
Well,
you.
I'm sure there is, but right now I can't think.
No big featured.
No big featured things. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's.
There is one thing I could elaborate a little bit on. When I was in Bristol Bay up in Alaska, leaving after the job was done, I got on a helicopter to go back to Anchorage. Well, the first stop was at a little Loran station, which was a station just set up by the geophysical people themselves, and you get 3 of them, and then you triangularize off the stations to find out where you are, in addition to the Doppler sonars, which lets you know within feet of where you are, where the other, and at that time there was only one satellite to help and to update the systems, and that would sometimes would be 2 or 3 hours before it would occur. Because it had to be at the right angle and everything.
That wasn't the first and only, it's just that there was one in operation, or?
No, that was first and only.
One,
Yes,
first and only.
Right, that's right at the beginning of the GPS systems. Right at the beginning. Yeah. Well, anyway, I took the helicopter to one of these little stations, and next to the station was a little lake, and they took off from a seaplane, or an amphibian, you call it, and headed back to Anchorage. Well, on the way, the guy said they couldn't get the helicopter started. So he dropped me off out in the middle of no place with where there was a larger lake, because the one next to the little station was too small to take off with a full loaded airplane. So he dropped me off, and here I am with a pair of hip boots, and I unloaded some of my heavy equipment onto the shoreline, and while he's gone, you'd hear creatures in the reeds, which was all around this little lake. You could only see about 6 feet into the lake, because it was these little, about as big around as your index finger, just all the way around the lake. And so anyway, I will never do that again out there. But yeah, I didn't. He had a 30-30 in the gun in the airplane. I should have taken it, because up to that time we had counted about 18 grizzlies roaming around.
Just gonna say, you come face to face with the grizzly. It's not a comfortable position.
But one thing he did say, you walk out in the water, it's deep enough where they don't like to go in the deep water. Of course, they fish, in the rivers and things, but they would tend to float and roll over and all kinds of things, so they don't like going out in the deeper water.
Yeah. Of course, with hip boots, it wouldn't be very easy for you to swim in.
Well, yeah, it was shallow. You could walk. You could walk all the way across the thing. Yes, it was but that's the one thing I probably should have mentioned. But it's kind of scary, though.
Yeah.
Especially when you hear those things in the bush going.
Yeah.
They're big.
You don't know what they are.
And you can't tell what they are.
Yeah, any last comments, Mr. Dow?
Well, no, I'm certainly glad, though, that a lot of people say their service was a bad experience, but for me, it got me out into the world and desiring an education, because my parents were not generally education minded at that time, and so I did it on my own and got
wonderful, amazing career in your electronic field, you might say.
Yes, in electronics,
Yeah.
and it was
okay. Well, as we finish this interview, Mr. New, we want to thank you for your service to our country and wish you the best in the future. We feel that it's important to record and preserve the history of your service and others like you, of course, so that the world never forgets.
Thank you again, Mr. New, for your service and your time.
It was certainly a pleasure for me to do it. It was
Thank you.